and today we'll be stepping back into the everyone's favorite 5D Synchro era to take a look at Earthbound Immortals. Yes, I never thought I'd be looking at them, right? Well, anyway, they're the level 10 boss monsters based on the Rasca lines from Peru, I think, and were used commonly by the Dark Signers as their end bosses, each one in their separate deck. So yeah, that's somewhat how they were meant to be played, but anyway, they got a few support cards that make them some sort of an archetype, so to speak. So let's check them all out. We start off first with their only low-level monster in the archetype, that being Earthbound Walker. And it's a level 4 fiend with 1200 attack and 1900 defense, and its effect is that Earthbound Immortal monsters cannot be destroyed by their own effects. Now, to anyone unfamiliar with the archetype, this effect might be a lot of confusion for you when you first glance at it. But anyway, I would have loved this effect if it was on an archetypal field spell, which the archetype does not have, to tell you in advance, which is really disappointing since they live and die by the field spells. And yeah, now this would be, I mean, it's a decent card. You could run 2 or 3 copies of this just fine, since there's a certain other monsters require fiend type monsters. So yeah, perfectly serviceable for what it does. Alright, now let's get on to the actual Earthbound Immortals, starting with Earthbound Immortal Asila Piscu, based on the Hummingbird glyph, and it was used by Carly in her Fortune Lady deck. And this part of the effect is shared by all Earthbound Immortal monsters, so I'm gonna get it out of the way here. There can only be one Earthbound Immortal monster on the field. If there is no field spell card on the field, destroy this card. And your opponent cannot target this card for attacks, and this card can attack your opponent directly. Alright, so this part of the effect is shared among all Earthbound Immortals, and this is now where their individual effects come in. Asila Piscu has the effect, and when it leaves the field, except by its own effect, destroy as many face-up monsters your opponent controls as possible, and if you do, inflict 800 damage to your opponent for each monster destroyed. As you can perfectly see, and if you watch the anime and you're familiar with Fortune Ladies, this was paired up with the field spell you're familiar with since I reviewed Fortune Ladies before, that being Future Visions, which banishes all normal summoned monsters and returns them during the next standby phase. So basically you normal summon this with Future Visions on the field, and you basically wipe your opponent's entire board. And yeah, I mean, it's one of the better Earthbound Immortal monsters, that's for sure. And I'll get to later what kind of field spells you want to use for Earthbound Immortals, because since they're level 10s with really high stats, there are a few field spells that can abuse that fact and can be pretty good in conjunction with them. So anyway, next up we have Earthbound Immortal Kakapo, based on the Giant glyph, and its unique effect is that if this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the destroyed monster's original attack. Now this is actually considered to be one of the worst ones, because since it can attack directly, you're always guaranteed a 3000 attack, 3000 damage on board, but if you destroy an opponent's monster and score some minor damage, you're never gonna get anywhere close to 3000 maximum. Well, if you destroy a monster with 2000 attack, that is, it's a bit too specific for what it does, and yeah, you might as well be attacking directly all the time. So yeah, Kakapo. And yeah, he was used by Kiryu Kyosuke, who was running an Infernity deck, which makes sense since this guy is a fiend. And yeah, sorry, one of the best Dark Signers has one of the worst Earthbound Immortals in existence. Alright, moving on, we have Earthbound Immortal Araya, used by Misty Lola, who was using a Reptilian deck. Yeah. And if this card is destroyed by a card effect except by its own effect, destroy all cards on the field. Well, now this is actually pretty damn interesting. Well, it's certainly a definition of a boss monster that can punish you for destroying it by card effects, since you know you cannot target it by but for attacks and everything. But yeah, it's prone to any other type of removal, such as kaiju baiting or maybe banishing with a dimensional prison or something. And its stats aren't the best. Well, they're certainly high stats, but they're certainly not the best. Kakapo, I think, has the highest original stats, and one of their later monsters with its special ability can become the Earthbound Immortal with the highest attack. Well, anyway, it's one of the better ones, not perfect by any means, but perfectly serviceable. Next up, we have Earthbound Immortal Chaku Chalua, based on the whale glyph. The last one was lizard based, of course. Forgot to mention that. He was used by Bomber, who was using a reactor deck. Two worst ones in a row. And its unique effect is that you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to half this card's defense on the field. This card cannot attack during the turn you activate this effect. While this card is in defense position, your opponent cannot conduct their battle phase. Now, the defense position effect can be really fun to pull off against super heavy samurai players because, yeah, I mean with super heavy samurai players, sorry. Because locking out of the battle phase can be really fun and can cause some massive slowdown against certain decks. But yeah, it's perfectly useless. It's basically useless if you have a link monster on board. So yeah, it's not that good. And the burn damage is completely minuscule since it's only half the defense of this monster. So yeah, not worth it. It's a bit of a gimmicky card to consider consistently running. Anyway, next up we have Earthbound Immortal Kusalu, used by D-Mock, who was using a monkey deck. Well, basically, he was using some very underwhelming ape monsters if we exclude the existence of Ape Fighter. Well, anyway, his unique effect is that if this card would be destroyed by battle, you can tribute one other monster instead, and if you do, halve your opponent's life points. To be honest, out of all the Earthbound Immortals, this one has the absolute best protection amongst all of them. I mean, sure, you need to tribute another monster, but hey, we live in an age where you can easily special summon just about anything nowadays, except Armed Dragon Catapult Cannon. Well, anyway, skimming off topic here, this is an absolute fun card to pull off, and we're building an entire deck around. And yeah, this is the definitive boss monster of any beast warrior deck, so go wild with it as a monkey. Next up we have Earthbound Immortal Uru, used by by Godwin's brother Roger, who was using some sort of a spider mishmash deck. And yeah, once per turn you can tribute one other monster, then target one face-up monster your opponent controls, take control of that target. Until the end phase, of course. If this was permanent, this would be a really great combo with Kusilu. But yeah, as it is now, it can be used as a link fodder nowadays, and that's about as high as it goes. And in terms of stats, it's actually one of the best Earthbound Immortals. No shit. But yeah, this is actually a really nice card. It's an insect, of course, since it's a spider. Has one of the highest defense values in the game for a main deck monster, for a main deck effect monster, that is. So yeah, and definitely worth running at least one of these. And the last Earthbound Immortal monster is Virakoje Rasca, based on the Condor glyph. Fun fact, Rasca is a Croatian slang for a female head teacher. Well, anyway, it's the Earthbound Immortal with the lowest attack among all them, but wait, we have the unique effect. Let's read it out. If this card is normal summoned, you can target up to 3 cards you control except this card, shuffle those cards and targets into the deck, then discard as many random cards as possible from your opponent's hand, but not more than the number of the returned cards. And if you do, this card gains 1000 attack for each card discarded by this effect. I'm just gonna say if my Rasca uses this as her primary boss monster, she wouldn't see past turn 3, maybe even earlier, because this effect is so underwhelming that it hurts. The only possible way you could ever benefit from this is if you're using this in a Madolce deck for some reason. Although I'll be questioning your deck building skills and your life choices if you choose to do so. And what you get for it is an above 3000 attack beater, and that's about it. Nothing pretty much to say about this otherwise that it's really, really bad. This is the worst Earthbound Immortal monster by far, and it definitely shows. But it was used by Godwin, the final end boss of the Dark Signers, and its anime effect was actually pretty busted. Its original attack and defense were 1, yeah, really specific. But its anime effect that it would cut your life points down to 1 by skipping your battle phase. Well, I mean, it's certainly anime bullshit, as I like to call it, but in a good way, of course. And yeah, I mean, run it for style points. That's what I'm gonna say, but ignore it if you have any sort of competitive deck building skills. And because Earthbound Immortals weren't quite an archetype just yet, here's a Synchro monster of all things, because Synchro era and everything. 100 Eyes Dragon is a card that I presume many of you were confused that I didn't bring up in the Infernity video, because it's basically not an Infernity support card, it's an Earthbound Immortal card, even though it was used by Kiryu Kiyosake once again. It's a Dragon Synchro, requires 1 Dark Tuner and 1 or more non-tuner Fiend type monsters, and once per turn you can banish 1 level 6 or lower Dark Effect monster from your graveyard until the end phase. This card's name becomes the banished monsters and replace this card effect with the banished monster's original effect. If this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, add 1 Earthbound Immortal monster from your deck to your hand. Since it has such a summoning condition, the only deck you could probably see it played, and it's one of their best cards there, is of course Infernities, from which it originates from the anime. However, yeah, it's in an actual Earthbound Immortal deck. I mean, you could run it if you're basing them around Infernities, and that's about as high as it goes. Really, I mean, you could pull some decent effect snatching from your own monsters in your graveyard, but that's about as high as it goes. And as we'll see later, this is the best way to search your Earthbound Immortal monsters from your deck, since these guys literally have no searching consistency in their main deck. So yeah, what we have here is the best. As specific and clunky as it may be, it's the best. Alright, moving on to their spell and trap lineup, we have Earthbound Revival. Discard 1 card and target 1 Earthbound Immortal monster and 1 field spell card in your graveyard, add those target to the hand. Okay, recovery is nice, but this is not the way I'd go about it. I mean, it fetches both your Earthbound Immortal and your field spell in order to get it, but from your graveyard, that is. But the factor we have to see here is that Earthbound Immortal and that field spell need to be used first, and getting to your Earthbounds is really, really hard. Well, Rasca is a bit easier to fetch since he has below 1500 attacks, so Mystic Tomato can fetch him. So yeah, not worth it, basically. I mean, if it could fetch banished Earthbound Immortal monster, then I'd actually call it a somewhat really lovely card, because running Allure of Darkness in the deck actually really helps with consistency and draw power. So yeah, if you run this, it's at 1 max. Goodbye. such as the next spell card, and their final spell card by the way, Earthbound Whirlwind, which if you control an Earthbound Immortal monster, you can destroy all spell and trap cards your opponent controls. Well, basically the boss monster exclusive spell card which destroys all, ends all, be all end all defeat cards that were, I mean, it's good, but the fact that it requires a level 10 monster that is extremely hard to summon sometimes is really hard. I'd rather run Scarlet Security than this thing because, well, it does require you to control a specific level 8 Synchro monster. It's miles easier to summon than Earthbound Immortals. Alright, for their first trap card is Earthbound Wave, and when your opponent activates a spell or trap card while you control an Earthbound Immortal monster, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. Now, this is actually that kind of situation where I would say always run 3 because it's simple effect negation from spell and traps, but the fact that it's so difficult to summon some of these Earthbound Immortals makes it very risky to consider running, because it usually can end up as a massive first turn brick if you draw into it. Next up we have, oh, this is a lovely one. Offering to the Immortals may be one of the easiest ways, I mean, one of the only ways that is, to spawn tokens so you can summon Earthbound Immortals. When your opponent's monster declares a direct attack while you have 3000 or less life points, negate the attack, and if you do, special summon 2 ceremonial tokens, rock type, earth, level 1, attack 0, defense 0. And if you do that, add 1 Earthbound Immortal card or Earthbound Revival or War of the Earthbound from your deck to your hand. Ceremonial tokens cannot be tributed except for a tribute summon of an Earthbound Immortal monster, and cannot be used as a synchro material. Or, you know, it can be used as a link material, but yeah, skimming off topic. Roar of the Earthbound, as we'll see later on, is one of their trap cards, and it's lovely, as we'll see on later. But the tedium of getting this thing activating is unbearable. I mean, you could turbo it out by using Wall of Revealing Light to lower your life points to 1000 so you can prevent monsters with 7000 or more attack points from attacking you directly. But if it was by any direct attack, I would have actually called it a really decent card, since you can set this on the first turn and spawn some tokens. But yeah, as it is now, this is actually one of the only main deck search options for Earthbound Immortals, and it's pretty bad. Just no. Next up we have Revival of the Immortals, and you can target 1 Earthbound Immortal monster in your graveyard, special summon it. It cannot declare an attack this turn. Also, your opponents take no battle damage from attacks involving it. Yeah, as you see in the artwork, the only monster that benefits from this is Kakapo. No, just no. I mean, you could reuse Asila Piscu and then send it to the graveyard next turn, or Araya, but no, just don't. And their last card is Roar of the Earthbound, mentioned earlier. It's a continuous trap, and once per turn when an opponent's monster declares an attack, target the attacking monster, destroy that target, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to half the destroyed monster's attack. You must control an Earthbound Immortal monster with the attack higher than the attack of the attacking monster to activate and resolve this effect. The second part of the effect is immensely confusing to you, since you cannot attack Earthbound Immortals. But the ruling states that if the only monster you control is an Earthbound Immortal, that I think your opponent can still attack you directly as well. Meaning this card basically is gains this usefulness it has. But the fact of the matter is that if you have a high attack Earthbound Immortal monster, if your opponent has no significant ways of removing it from the field, he's probably gonna be like a sitting duck in defense position. Yeah, it's a continuous trap because we wouldn't want to go in minus. And then again, what is a minus for Earthbound Immortals? Consistency wouldn't go beyond the 1 out of 3, because we're talking about an archetype made mostly about level 10 tribute summon monsters. Because yeah, Now power definitely gets a 3 out of 3 because these things with their gargantuan attacks, if you can bring them out, that is, can attack all directly, and you can also always control one of them, of course. And yeah, the potential is certainly there, but it's poorly executed. So 3 out of 3 in power there, but the comeback ability, definite 1 out of 3. They exclusively depend on soul charge and other extremely non-generic archetypal support cards, well, non-archetypal support cards, so to speak. So 1 out of 3 is there in comeback ability. Protection exists in form of Kusilu, and that's about as high as it goes, so 1 out of 3. Versatility, look, we're talking about level 10 Earthbound Immortal monsters who you're actually not supposed to play in the same deck, so that's about the highest 1 out of 3 I have ever given. Now, some plays you actually can, well, depending on which Earthbound Immortal you prefer, you can perform the following plays with some field spells, as I mentioned earlier. Some of the field spells include Bound of the Bound Creator, Future Visions, and Asila Piscu, since it's a protection field spell and grants them additional attack boost. If you really want to get that condom protection, though, use Asila Piscu with the field barrier because, yeah, you can never be too safe now these days, can ya? Anyway, it was fun, but yeah. I would have really loved if they printed the anime-only Earthbound Servant monsters with their fusions and synchros, because it will also provide some tribute material for Earthbound Immortals, and I would have actually loved to see an Earthbound Immortal of Red Nova that Jack dueled in which he obtained his Scarlet Nova Dragon. But yeah, we're not supposed to see that for another 5.5 centuries, as we saw from the newest Neos support. Can't believe that Archetype's coming back. Well, anyway, that is it for today's Archetype analysis. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more results and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe. And as usual, I'll upload the next part whenever I can. See you all. Have a good day. And peace.